Evening all. Please excuse my dishevelled appearance this evening. It's just been a bit of an action-packed day with the family, and I've got some mutant hairs sticking out here and there, telling me I should get a haircut soon. This jumper's been sat on. It was nice and ironed this morning, but it's been sat on by various people and creatures. So yeah, I'm looking a little bit shabby, and this is the 30th Weekly Biscuit show that I've done, and I was thinking, should I do something a little bit more special for the 30th? But no, not. It's business as usual. It's the content, not the trimmings, isn't it? Look, just so that this tuft doesn't distract you, I'm going to sit at this rakish angle for the whole show. Old school, like the farmers. Anyway, that's better. So, what's caught my attention this week? Well, I have a theory, and that is that the progressive middle-class left have gone collectively insane. There is just no other explanation I can find that can explain the kind of things that we're witnessing at the moment. I know Twitter is a pretty horrendous place where everything's hypercharged 1,000-fold. But even so, the kind of lack of a moral compass amongst those of Extinction Rebellion and FBPE have been shocking at times. So one example of this insanity is something that was witnessed in Trafalgar Square with Extinction Rebellion. And there was a group of protesters, activists there, and there was this large broccoli in the middle of the road, and they all formed a circle around the broccoli and were yelling abuse and putting a little cloth over it. And it was completely insane. And it's not just insane that they're yelling at broccoli, because it's a performance, it's a bit of street theatre, but then they put this out there thinking, this is going to reach everybody in the country, this is going to mean something. And of course, it doesn't mean a single thing outside of those people doing this performance. And so much of Extinction Rebellion has been a performance. And some of it just absolutely bonkers as well. The point being lost somewhere along the line. You had an academic outside of the Department of Transport with a hammer and chisel, and she's knocking round holes into the windows of the Department of Transport. Why that in particular? Why that form of protest? Okay, can understand protesting outside of the Department of Transport. We've got to get off fossil fuels, we've got to have some sort of clean transportation system, and you're not doing enough. But the hammer and chisel? That's just criminal damage. She gets hauled away. Oh, I'm a victim. No, you're not. You're hammering holes into a building that's not your building. No, there's criminal damage. And then on the underground, we had the site. Two things happened this week. One was an 83-year-old chap who glued himself to a tube train. And then you had some other Extinction Rebellion activists climb on top of a train and try and stop the train from moving. Whereupon the passengers just grabbed the protesters off the top of the train, threw them down to the ground, and roughed them up. They didn't kill them, they roughed them up. And again, you think this, surely the point is try and get people off their out of their cars, stop using their cars to get into work, and mass transit systems are greener. But no, the mass transit systems must now also be attacked. So if that's the case, how are people supposed to get around? As I said, everything about Extinction Rebellion is about narcissism. It's about performance. There's nothing that they do that illustrates what could be done to make things better. It is collective insanity. And the activism insanity doesn't end there. There was also the matter recently of the anti-Brexit protest in London. They claim it was 1 million. wasn't quite that number. Estimates analysis shows that it's probably about 80,000 people. Nevertheless, that's still a large, sizable amount of people motivated to do this protest. We know FBPE are very motivated in this regard. What I objected to, what I noticed was there was footage of Jacob Rees-Mogg walking his son, one of his younger children, who's under 12, walking his son home through the streets around Knightsbridge. And there are some protesters there. And he's getting harangued by the protesters. Now, some people have called this out. Notably, Joe Swinson, leader of the Liberal Democrats, called out the protesters for needlessly harassing Jacob Rees-Mogg and his son. But FBPE have countered with, well, you know, he was walking around the fringes of a Brexit protest. So he was provoking people by his mere presence, nothing that he said or did. It was just his mere presence walking through. And he took his son with him, you know, that he was using his son. Well, that's nonsense. And I'll tell you why. Because I know that area of London quite well. It's Knightsbridge. And I instantly recognised the streets that they were walking down. Now, I went to school in Knightsbridge. I went to prep school down there called Sussex House. And one of Sussex House's rivals that was just a few streets away was Hill House. That's the one where they wear the kind of beige jumpers and the rust brown knickerbockers. You know, we used to tease them because we just had grey blazers and dark trousers, but they had this kind of weird mountaineering gear as their school uniform. So I know Hill House well, and I know that's where Jacob Rees-Mogg's son attends that school. So I know the route that you have to take from Hill House round to the street where Jacob Rees-Mogg lives, because that's a street that when I was a child, you know, we had to walk into bus stops, and our school was divided into the main school, and then there was a gymnasium and music centre a few streets away. So I know that street where Jacob Rees-Mogg lives. So that is the route you would take if you were picking up your child from school, if it was at Hill House, and go those few streets to where they live. So I knew what Mogg was doing. He's just walking his son home. And that's the area where they live. What's he supposed to do? Teleport? You know, it's complete and utter nonsense what FBP was saying. You know, but the thing is that I of the opinion that we don't politicise our children, but you know, we've seen with Extinction Rebellion and we've seen with FBP, and this is the progressive left overall, is that they don't mind politicising children. Children really don't mean much to the progressive left. There's no sanctity of childhood with them. As we see, and this is just, you know, not just on top of the lies, but we just see that they cannot see that maybe we should back off. Maybe we should just, you know, there's Mogg, but he's with his son. They know they could easily find out where Mogg lives as well and protest outside his house. It's not difficult to find out where he lives, or even the street where he lives. You know, the footage of that completely deranged communist protesting outside his house a few months ago. You could, you know he lives in that area, and you could easily work out where he lives. So it was a deliberate ploy by the protesters to place themselves in between Mogg's home and where the areas around his home where he would normally go to. So yeah. Utter nonsense. If any FBP person tells you that Mogg was provoking things, utter nonsense. So that brings us neatly on to the other big story of this week, which was the deal that Boris Johnson and the government was concluding with the European Union. They had this deal that was tentatively palatable to the European Union. Now, it was going to be a big debate and discussion amongst those of us who are interested about whether this deal is just a rehash of Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, Are there any significant differences? What differences might they be? Whether they are differences and whether this new agreement is something that we can go along with, or is it something that is just as bad and just as terrible? We were on the verge of having those debates, and then the rug was pulled out. Going back to the revised agreement, it looked like not only had it the tentative acceptance of the European Union, it looked like a lot of members of parliament were prepared to go along with it. A number of Brexiters were prepared to go along with it. And Leave voters were saying, okay, this could be the one. Let's just get this over and done with. We're just sick and tired of this being dragged out. So it looked like it had potential. Now, I'm not going to comment on the whys and wherefores, how good the deal was, because I've only seen some bits. Some bits are not great, I'll admit, but it looked like they avoided a lot of things being trapped into things in perpetuity, and that things could be renegotiated or withdrawn from further down the line. It looked like there was a little bit more flexibility in this deal than with the withdrawal agreement. But we never got the chance to have that full discussion because now Oliver Letwin has had to stick his oar in and ruin everything. So it looks like Letwin has sort of put his grubby hands all over the document, made it even worse. Now Boris Johnson has had to send a letter asking for an extension from the European Union, but he hasn't signed it. That's the tactical thing. He hasn't signed it. So now we're counting down. Now we're just counting down the clock to October the 31st. Who knows what's going to happen? This is the whole thing. The Remainers just keep throwing little spanners in the works, and there's always a way around it, because actually I think the people at the top of Brexit are smarter than their counterparts in Remain. I think that intellectually they're smarter, but I think Remain more cunning. We shall see how it goes. It ain't over yet. We can't even have a discussion about what kind of Brexit we're going to have, because it's just the Remainers are just finding new ways of holding things up, throwing spanners in the works. But anyway, time is ticking, and I don't think the European Union wants an extension. Let's see if they hold to that. So yeah, I couldn't let this next story pass without comment. We're going to go over the Atlantic to the United States and the clash between Hillary Clinton and Tulsi Gabbard. A clash and a response that I have seldom seen in American or British politics, but it was a sight to behold. So anyways, Hillary Clinton accused Tulsi Gabbard of being a Russian sleeper agent, a Russian plant under the influence of Putin. And of course, this set Gabbard off. She was just having none of that. And she fired back with a very bile-laden tirade against Hillary Clinton, calling her, amongst other things, a warmonger. This is true. I remember when the last US presidential election took place, I wasn't enthused with either candidate. My choice for Republican nominee fell by the wayside very early on. That was Rand Paul. And I kind of like I shifted to a lot of the front runners. There was things about Rubio I liked. There was things about Cruz I liked. There was things about Trump. I thought, oh my goodness, this is just full on celeb. This is kind of all spangles glitter. Hello. Didn't know what to make of him at first, and then it became Trump versus Hillary. And at that stage, the arguments in the UK about the candidates were getting heated. I mean, this isn't even our presidential election. We're just onlookers. We don't have a dog in this fight. Nevertheless, a lot of people I knew decided they did have a dog in the fight. And we had arguments. And because I wouldn't out and out endorse Hillary, in fact, I didn't endorse Hillary at all. And I was very tentative. Trump, but at least she's not as bad as Hillary. I lost friendships over that. And I'll tell you the moment where I thought Hillary Clinton not only was a bad candidate, but I think she was a scary candidate. And I thought, oh my goodness, anything is better than having Hillary Clinton as president. And that's when she gave a speech about Russia and cybersecurity. And in the speech, her eyes were bulging. She was practically frothing at the mouth, but she had this kind of enraged, I'd say almost insane look in her eye. And she was saying she would treat a cyber attack on the United States the same as she would treat a military attack. Now, the implications of that statement are truly horrific. That we saw the kind of things that Russia was allegedly meddling in. I mean, some of it you could argue, although there's not really been any proof, but you know, they were meddling with elections, but certainly just kind of with backdoor channels and things like trying to get into all these different things, not the security, not the defense, but just in little areas. And you just think, if your response to that, to the Russians leaking emails, is that you're going to what, invade them, nuke them, bomb them? What kind of nonsense is that? But anyway, she was also pushing for the US Air Force to get involved over Syria and enforcing no-fly zones, and again coming into conflict and contact with the Russians over that. She was quite prepared to do that, and of course the her military advisors just seemed confused and not with it at all. So, you know, Tulsi Gabbard, in my opinion, is absolutely right. But Michael Malice, the strange sprite of the right that he is, just tweeted out, you know, was it a strange suicide note from Tulsi Gabbard on Twitter that Gabbard dared to call Hillary Clinton a warmonger, amongst other things. And the joke is that somehow Gabbard's going to have an accident at some point. I think it's too high profile for that. Tulsi Gabbard's too high profile to die in an accident just yet. I don't know. But anyway, Malice is weird. And finally, there was something I noticed on Twitter earlier this week when somebody, I think they're an academic, put out a tweet saying that they thought it would be better during World War II if Britain had been occupied, because like Germany and the other continental European countries that were occupied in World War II, we would have emerged afterwards with a better perspective on things. We would have reassessed our nation's ethos and priorities had we been occupied. Yeah, we would have been occupied by the Nazis, and I don't think they would have allowed us much time to reflect on what kind of nation we were, what kind of nation we want to be. Certainly we would not be reflecting on the possibilities of being a kind of different liberal democracy to the ones that emerged after World War II. Just how would we have emerged from World War II under Nazi occupation? Either the Americans would have to have crossed the entire Atlantic to come and liberate us. The logistics of that operation alone would be unfeasible. Or we could wait for the Nazis to be overrun by the communists. And again, we wouldn't have that time to think about what kind of liberal free market democracy we could be. No, we won the war and we emerged as a liberal free market democracy after World War II. But it just goes to show you, this is the, as I said right at the start, this is the insanity of the progressive middle class left at the moment. You know, that they cannot analyze the stupidity in the things that they say. So let's plow onward next week. Let's take this 1 week at a time. Take it 1 week at a time, one biscuit at a time. And not three.